Okay, in this video we're going to talk about graded potentials. Now, graded potentials are short-lived, localized changes in membrane potential or voltage. So what we find here is that the stronger the stimulus, the more voltage change that occurs and the farther that current flows. Now these graded potentials, think about them as almost like a wave of voltage. And these waves are ultimately triggered by a stimulus that opens gated ion channels. Now this results in depolarization, sometimes hyperpolarization as well, and they're named for their location. So we talked about the end plate potential back in the neuromuscular junction, which is the type of graded potential that occurs at the motor end plate. Now, receptor potential is actually also called generator potential. This is actually where graded potentials and receptors of sensory neurons are formed. And so when you maybe smell an odorant molecule, that creates a receptor potential, which may or may not trigger an action potential. Now, postsynaptic potential is a neuron graded potential, and these occur within the dendrites of neurons, the cell bodies of neurons, and this may or may not cause an action potential to be formed. So if we think about what this graded potential is, it's basically a local area of membrane potential change. We're saying that in this example, there's a stimulus that causes a local area of depolarization. And this depolarization can spread, and as it spreads, that local area of depolarization also dissipates and gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So in a lot of ways, it's like a wave in a pond, where once the wave is formed, it gets smaller over time and distance. Now we find that graded potentials are caused by these gated ion channels opening, and depolarization or hyperpolarization can spread from one area of the membrane to the next. And so as the depolarization spreads, you find that there's little local areas of positive charge. However, it also gets smaller as it spreads. So as you see over here, as this depolarization wave spreads and it dissipates, the effect on voltage locally becomes less. So you can see that at this point where the receptor potential was generated, you see that there's a strongest change of voltage, which is illustrated by this darker red color. And as these positive charges spread inside of the axon, or just somewhere in the cell, they become more or less concentrated. And by being less concentrated, you see that the change of voltage is actually less than it would be at the point of generation. So current flows but dissipates quickly and also decays. So graded potentials are signals, but only over very short distances, and over time the current dissipates so much that the local area of voltage also decreases. So what we find then is that this might be the point of initial depolarization, and you might be really depolarized at this point, but as this current spreads inside the cell, it gets closer and closer and closer back towards resting membrane potential, because the ions dissipate and then their effect on the resting voltage becomes less and less.